What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, Colin and I actually sit down for kind of a more informal conversation, just kind of about the state of film photography and a couple things that I had found interesting from other photographers through lectures and some stuff that I thought was just some good talking points and some content to bring you guys during this weird time. Colin, this is kind of the first I don't know if we'll do, many of these. It's just kind of given circumstances with COVID-19. We're here just chatting about kind of what's going on and how it's impacting our lives and film photography. So I guess going off that, how have you been and what have you been up to? Have you been taking many photos? Give us the rundown.
I've been pretty good. I think that this time to just sit back and kind of reflect, it gives you more time to kind of think about photography as a craft as a whole and what you want to document, I guess, more consciously. I think that the more I photograph without thinking about it, I think it has more impact, but in other ways, I think just consciously thinking about what you do can also be good in other ways too, like setting goals in mind to make like a zine or a book. But I haven't really been shooting as much as I had liked to. But yeah, it's just kind of limited to the area that you're surrounded by. But I'm going to try to get out, drive around, take some photos and shit.
Yeah, I would say the same thing for me, other than the day we had kind of gone out and shot, which I'm sure the people will see eventually. I haven't really been able to get out much, which is kind of disappointing. I just got the Mamiya 7, which is like the most coveted camera I could have possibly wanted, and then
can't even use it.
Yeah, not even a month later, I'm stuck inside.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think, like you said, it's good to be introspective and kind of look at some older photos and look at your work as a whole and, I don't know, maybe plan things for the future or use the time to kind of maybe curate your portfolio, or even I was tweaking my website and just kind of adding some newer stuff and just kind of going over with the work I have now instead of, being able to create new work. But I think that segues kind of perfectly into the main question I had kind of heard. I was watching a negative feedback video with, I think his name was Alec Soth, and he had a quote that I thought was interesting and I thought was especially pertinent to the time that we're in right now. And he says, "One of the great things about photography is that it can age really well, so pictures can actually get better over time." And I just thought, the photos taking now in quarantine of our cities or of daily life or being locked inside or whatever, and how now there might be no real value to them, especially on an individual level. So you taking photos of places around your mom's house in isolation due to quarantine might not be super marketable for social media or have a lot of value for you, but it's those photos kind of turn into something historical, and it's when people 20, 30, 50, 100 years from now are looking at COVID-19 and how it affected people, or the time period, it's those photos have significantly more value to them then, whereas at the time there might not have been that value.
Damn. Yeah, I mean, I agree. Honestly, I feel like you nailed every point on that. It kind of makes me think about a lot of the photographs that I've taken that I haven't really thought about too much. Later on, I will tend to like them as time progresses for whatever reason. Sometimes I can't even figure out the reason. Sometimes I can, but it's really interesting that time can actually affect the value of how you view something personally, or maybe as the world as a whole. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, and it made me think about too, like some of the photos I have taken and how, like when I was first getting into film photography, I was taking lots of photos of specifically of my friends and like in my apartment, and it's just crazy how like at that time there was photos of my roommate or whatever, and it was him just kind of lounging, looking more sloppy, and nothing that I would ever really want to post, and maybe he wouldn't really want posted. But it's like now looking back at them, there serves a far, I guess, greater cause of like actually, being a memory and like a moment in time that brings me back to like 2017 or whatever. So it's interesting how I feel like there's photos that with time kind of garner value to them, whether it's individually or to someone else. And I think that kind
Yeah.
of goes into. There was a quote I actually heard today from Todd Hido, which I know that both of us really enjoy his work. And it was from either a seminar or he was speaking to like a college campus or something. And he was saying how the meaning of an image is in the eye of the beholder, and how he was talking about how many of his photos, there's like a lot of interpretation to them, and how the way he perceives something might not be the same as his audience. And I just think that, like, I don't know, especially with landscape photography, and I feel like some of the stuff you've been doing more recently too, like this surreal landscape style, I think that is especially true. How it's like you might take this photo with the intention kind of being one way or whatever, and someone might look at it and get the complete opposite feeling, but still get a strong emotional, you know, whatever
Yeah.
out of it.
Yeah, I mean, it can be anything. It can be shapes, it can be colors. I think what Todd Hido does really well is he documents a lot of just houses. And I think that what's really interesting about that is that obviously everyone has lived around houses, but depending on the lighting and how the composition is of that scenery, it can kind of like bring you back to your childhood or a time in your life where you were looking at maybe those types of suburbs or that type of town. So I feel like just one house can resonate with multiple people in multiple ways, depending on different times in your life or, maybe even where you are now. It's interesting how shapes and colors can just like resonate in that way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's like, I didn't watch his entire seminar because I was doing it while I was editing for work. But yeah, he touched on how a lot of his photos, he takes them because they remind him of something like from his hometown or his childhood.
Mm.
So it's interesting that you bring that up because it's like literally was like reflecting exactly what he was, explaining.
Yeah, and I think that that's kind of with a lot of photographs that I take, I don't necessarily think about um, maybe this past experience or whatever, but after I take it, as time goes on, I realize that the reason why I took this is because it instinctually resonated with me in some way in my past or present, and I just didn't know of it at that time. And I feel like it's so odd to me how you can't really put that stuff into words, but and I think that that's why people have an emotional feeling out of photographs. It's sometimes things you can't articulate, but there's sometimes memories that are just lodged in the back of your brain that you can't even get out, but you feel them in some way, just on colors or whatever.
Yeah, definitely. It's like almost like your subconscious is drawing you towards it without even there being, like a true black or white answer as to why. And I think that it's kind of like what you said. It's like that's why people can be so drawn to photos because it's like not black and white. It's multifaceted and like
Well, it
this.
can be black and white.
Right, but like a photo can evoke like multiple sets of nostalgia or this, sense of home or whatever it may be that like people don't even realize because it's like subconsciously nailed into them.
Yeah. Do you think that nostalgia is why people resonate with photography
With
for
film
the most
photography,
part?
you think? You mean?
I don't think it needs to be film. Do you think photography as a whole, do you think that photography captures elements that resonate with some time in people's lives? And that's why sometimes people like a photograph, but they don't know why.
Yeah, I mean, I think like, just like in and of itself, photography, the fact that it's capturing a moment is like I feel like such a raw form of like nostalgia. So I think that yeah, it's like that just bringing people back to a specific moment is like inevitable for people to
Yeah.
feel that type of way.
It's an escape, just like a movie. It's a
Hmm.
way to, immerse yourself into something for, probably a short period of time. I don't think some people just look at a photograph and are just like enamored for like an hour. Some people probably are,
Probably.
but yeah, for sure. It's like it's some escape. It's
Yeah, and that was like Todd Hido. He was even saying how with a lot of his photos, he like builds uh like this storyline or storytelling or like fiction out of these photos that there might not actually be like much of a story of just this house, but when you see there was one photo specifically he was talking about where it was uh two separate rooms were lit up by a TV light, and he was saying how it was interesting to him how there was two people up late at night watching TV, but that they were not watching it together. And he
in
just
different
like,
rooms.
yeah, he kind of like drew this whole like fantasy about like, oh, what
Mm,
socioeconomical or relationship problems is going on in this
right.
household.
Like, are
And
they getting a divorce?
yep, and I
Huh.
think that that was like interesting how like I feel like storytelling plays a big part even in these like empty barren landscapes, and I think it's like same with your
Yeah.
photography. A lot of like your photos from California where it's just like these like empty landscapes, but it seems like there's something that happened there or like there's something that it's trying to tell me almost.
Yeah, and I think that with a lot of those photos at that time in my life specifically, I was just in a lot of pain. I was lost, and I think that that making those photographs was a way for me to understand that pain. And looking back at those photographs now, I can completely understand my thought process in those moments, why I was feeling that way, what led me up to those moments. And it blows my mind that those images somehow taught me lessons. Like my subconscious taking that photograph taught me a lesson further on. And yeah, it's hard. It's hard to grasp. It's hard to grasp that sometimes, and I don't think a lot of people um, are comfortable with jumping into that because I think that those moments of capturing times in your life where you're not doing so well, even if it's just a landscape, it's a mirror of who you are. If you are documenting, a lot of isolated subjects, you probably feel isolated in some way. And I think that just like how social media kind of mirrors who you are, if you take a lot of selfies, you probably aren't the most confident person. It kind of photography mirrors who you are in just the ways you document things. You can kind of psychologically break it down if you really wanted to. But I don't think I'm that smart, and I don't think most people are that smart to figure that out either. But that's where the feeling comes in, is the mystery and not understanding. Sometimes even more. So
Yeah, and I think going off of that, he had talked about how a lot of his work is, taking these night shots of like suburban houses, and how he's made a significant amount of work through it and like published and has done a bunch of exhibitions and stuff. And he was saying how like young photographers would ask him when should they stop pursuing a project, especially like at the scale that he's done it at. And it was interesting how he had just said that like he's still learning not only photography but like stuff about himself by doing the project. And I just like, I don't know, I thought it was like very evident that he like this is a lifelong project that he's like getting value out of, even if he's not like necessarily making them for public eye or like making them for money or like, popularity or whatever.
Yeah. And I think when you do that for those reasons, they typically have more longevity.
Mm-hmm.
And it carries more of a, I don't want to say legacy attached to it, but it's more long-lived. I think Kendrick Lamar's music is going to be more long-lived than Drake because Kendrick Lamar took his time and he was patient, kind of laid back. But that's music, Yeah,
and I think with all of that stuff, like with art in general, you can just kind of tell like the intention behind it, and like when someone is doing it out of like the love of the game, so to speak, versus doing it because they can make a bunch of money.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that even like in ways the people kind of interpret your art I feel like for what it is. The mass of people do. In ways that the individual might not understand, but is reflected in the mass of the people as a whole. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. All right, so that's going to do it. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'd love to do more of these in the future if Colin and I can come up with some interesting topics. So with that being said, if you guys want to comment down below on some things that you guys would like to hear us talk about, whether it be photography related or, still within the art realm or just about our lives or whatever it may be, let us know. So with that being said, I think that's all I got for you guys. Stay safe and stay home. Peace out.